Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast, brought to you in association with our partners Metrobank, proud sponsors of the inaugural Metrobank One Day Cup, which we'll look at today, as well as the start of the international summer, which is now upon us. Wednesday night down at Canterbury, the first game of this brave new era. We also have an interview with one of the women leading the new era, the head coach, Charlotte Edwards. She'll be on the show in a bit. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Katya Witney and Gardner. Lauren Winfield-Hill will be joining us later in the show. But first, let's hear from the New England head coach, Charlotte Edwards. A few weeks ago, she sat down with the Wisden Cricket Monthly editor-in-chief, Phil Walker, about her new job.
Charlotte Edwards, thank you ever so much for joining us on the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. First of all, congratulations. It's been a big few weeks. And it feels apt, I think, to be talking to you this week, a couple of days out from a kind of a quiet revolution, really, in the English game, if you like. And you're probably used to talking about landmark moments through your career, but there can't be many bigger than what we've seen this week in the story of English domestic cricket. World-class overseas players, tier one counties going at it against one another. It doesn't get much more significant than that, does it really?
No, I did. I had a bit of a moment actually at Trent Bridge watching the Lancashire and the Blaze. And yeah, just really, I guess in my role, I've been involved with, the regional setup for 5 years and now in the role as England coach, to sit there yesterday and have a bit of a moment and think, this is pretty cool. Watching both teams warm up, see the professional setups that they were, to then watch the game and then watch the other games unfold as well. It was, it was a, like you say, significant moment in the women's cricket journey, really. And hugely proud.
Did you see it coming? If we'd had a chat 5 years ago?
Probably not to this extent, I don't think. I think how it's sort of developed in the last 5 years. I think, we go back to the 100 and then obviously the domestic new structure and WPL and things like that. Yeah, probably not, no. I do sit on a regular basis and think, wow, this is pretty cool now. And it's, I just, pinch yourself moments, really.
Well, there's been a few in recent weeks. Were there... it might sound glib to say were there second thoughts, but it's grounded in the reality that you had some very, very good, lucrative, profitable and interesting gigs that you were working with, obviously working at Hans and working at Mumbai and working at Sydney as well and doing really good work at all of these places. And it's not necessarily a given, right, that an international coach is the number one job anymore, but I guess with your particular relationship with English cricket, it was a no-brainer, presumably.
It was. I said to the players a couple of weeks ago, you don't play 20 years for England and just suddenly stop caring about English cricket. I think I had 8 years away from the team and that passion didn't go away, that care didn't go away. And, I hurt as much as the players did over the winter watching in Australia because, as an ex-England player and someone who's a big fan and obviously got good relationships with a lot of the players, that hurt. It was a no-brainer. It's always been my ambition. I've made that pretty clear, that I feel international cricket is the pinnacle. And it just felt the right time for me, having done a lot of great work over the last 8 years in different franchises and Hampshire. I've got a lot to thank for, really, for giving me that opportunity. So I feel, really ready to take on the next challenge.
With all of that experience now under your belt, post-playing career, how would you describe your style, right? Or your values or your principles as a coach now? Dare I ask, how do they differ from when Charlotte Edwards was a player?
Again, I did speak to the players about, me as a player is very different to me as a coach. I'm certainly more patient as a coach.
Right.
And I've got a lot more empathy. And I think that comes from potentially how my England career ended. I think up until that point, it was all, rosy, shall I say. So to miss out like I did, and of that hurt, I have a huge amount of empathy now for when I, don't select someone, or when I do select a team, because I know how important that is. So I'm certainly more patient. I wish I'd have been a patient captain, but I might not have been as good a player. So I don't like to compare them, but all I know is I've learned a lot from my playing days, and I've tried to take that into coaching, because I think the one thing I want to do is build good relationships with players. I really want to understand what makes them tick, and they hopefully will understand how I operate.
You've played with a few of them.
Yeah.
Is that useful or a hindrance?
I think useful. I think I think it was a long time ago as well.
Yeah,
I think a lot happens in 8 years. I think a lot of them were younger players then. So I feel, and I think a lot of them have worked with me as a coach, and they see how different I am as a coach. And I think, I think in any environment, you have to slightly adapt. And I think that's what I do pretty well. I think in franchise stuff, you're a different coach to potentially how I am at Hampshire, and probably how I'm going to be as England coach, because, there's certain environments needs different things from you as a coach, or different skills. And I think hopefully that's what I've learned over the last 8 years, how to potentially go into different environments and make an impact.
Obviously, if there's any proof needed about the scale of the job, then we saw it over the winter. And the important caveat to add, I think, is that whenever England cricket teams, invariably when England cricket teams touch down in Australia, then things tend to happen, and the best laid plans can sometimes unravel. It was a movie that we may have seen before, but it was also quite a stark thing to watch. And as you say, you felt the pain of having to witness it as a fan. And I guess we all did. And so, considering and taking into context what happened, are you under any illusions about the scale of the job in hand?
I absolutely know what we've got to do, and I think that's the thing. I don't think it's as big a job as people think it is, because there's talent there. I think that's first and foremost. I wasn't expecting 16-0. I was expecting it to be a lot closer than that. So
it was the Melbourne game, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's for those first two games just changed the whole series, and as soon as England lost that game in Melbourne, you honestly felt that it was going to probably unravel, and it did. And I think that was a significant moment. I know how much the Australians regard this England team, and I think that gives me confidence, because I know that when England play at their best, we can beat anyone, and they've proven that over the last couple of years. We just have to have a really strong game plan. I think in ODI cricket, I think that's my biggest sort of job, is to make sure we've got a framework to work towards. And we've implemented, we've spoken to the players in the last couple of weeks about that. And now it's about them playing more cricket.
Yeah.
There was 4 things I spoke to play. They want them to play more. It's about performance, and it's about performing at county cricket, which it was so great to watch all the performances yesterday. And it's about professionalism. It's about understanding what professionalism is, and professional behaviours, and what are required, and what's your responsibility as an England cricketer. And it's changing people's perception of the team now, because it did hurt in the winter, but there's a power of social media now within any sport that is not going away, and we've got to be smarter.
Yeah, and I guess small things get amplified, and then they get talked about on podcasts and stuff like that. I want to ask you about Kate Cross's line, and Kate is honest as day as long as we know, and she's been around a number of different iterations of the England team, and she referenced that there are not a lot of good things that are happening, but 1 or 2 things around the culture of the team might need addressing. And you, having been involved, I think, in contributing to the post-tour report as well, and certainly being privy to some of the testimonies, if you like, coming out. What do you think she was referring to there, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, Kate's closer to it than I was. And I think whenever there's any kind of disappointment like there was in Australia, of course, there's going to be things that are thrown around why they're not performing and stuff. But I spoke really openly to the players. What's gone is gone. All we can do is influence what's ahead of us. And there will be a lot of honesty, and there will be a lot of hard work. And I think that's one thing that's been said. And I think that's the key to any culture, in my opinion, that if you're honest and you work hard, and you're prepared to have some tough conversations, then I think we're going to move forward really, really quickly. And the players all identified that as well. So I think my job's pretty easy in many ways.
It's a good time to be taking it on.
Well, because they're receptive, because it's been so hard. It was such a brutal winter.
Yeah.
That the messaging now is really clear. You know, we've got to sharpen up.
Do you reckon some of them are thinking the boss is back? The boss is back in town.
I don't know. I don't want it to be seen like that, but equally, I think a lot of the players that know me will know I've got incredibly high standards, but equally I like enjoying fun, and they'll have a lot of fun along the way, but we've got to be prepared to work hard, because I go to Australia year on year and I see how hard they work, but equally how competitive it is over there. And that's what I want to create over here, that getting into this England team, you've absolutely earned the right to play. And that's through performances, through attitude, and the way you conduct yourself.
This is a question not related to women's cricket, but more a question of the two cultures, really, the two cricketing cultures of England and Australia. And we are joined at the hip, and we rely on one another, and we're two sides of the same coin, and all the rest of it. But there were some comments that came out around the winter that seemed to me to clarify or to cement some of my own thoughts regarding it. And there seems to be a difference in the cultural dominance of cricket in Australia compared to over here. Cricket does not occupy the same position in UK life as it does in Australia. Considering that, and considering the advantages that they have of space and weather and central funding and sport being embedded in the culture, the bridge seems quite vast from the outside. And I'm not just talking specifically about the England women's team today versus the Australian women's team. I'm talking about the two cultures more generally. I know John Lewis referred to that perhaps slightly glibly, and it backfired on him, but I can understand where he was coming from. And I wonder if, when we have these conversations around our two cultures, that one has to consider that there are certain intractable realities as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Australia, and I respect and admire the way they go about cricket. I think there's been a lot of investment in cricket in Australia, and I don't know if you've ever been, but there's a new.
I've been a few times, yeah.
To a Cricket Central. There's this new facility in Sydney, and it's unbelievable. And that has to produce cricketers, because it's a place you want to train at, and I think that's what we've got to try and create over here. I do think that what we've created over here in terms of our county setup is, I think, better than Australia in terms of the amount of games we play. I think they're restricted to the amount of games they play, but I think we're doing a lot of things right, considering, like you say, cricket's probably not embedded as much over in England, but I think there are a lot of things we're doing well. And that's what I didn't want to come out of the winter, is that, we've got to look at county set. We are doing a great job at county level, producing young cricketers to play for England, and I think that's something I'm really proud of. And and I want us to keep investing in county cricket. I disagree around the, of course it's easier to train over there because the sun's out more, but absolutely, we've got so many opportunities here and the way the England team is resourced now, they get to go anywhere in the winter. So there shouldn't be any excuses in that respect. And that's one thing I've been really impressed with so far. Even just planning the winter, we're going to take these players away. We're going to give them everything now and the best chance to perform. So
no excuses.
There is no excuses, no.
Yeah. Relatedly, I suppose, if the English game is going to broaden its appeal and become, if you like, if it's going to reclaim some of its position in English life, then tapping into demographics that have been ignored, really, and neglected in recent times is part of the challenge, right? Your job is at the top, but that the pyramid, everything relates. Are you mindful of that as someone who doesn't just have a role at the top of the English game, but someone whose conscience is attached to the game as well? And are you mindful that if we really want to get the game back to where it could be, then we need to tap into those pockets of English life that have been ignored?
Well, if there's one thing I've done, I've worked in every aspect of cricket in this
Right.
country. Chance to shine when I was an England player, and I saw the importance of going into state schools and working there and on the street program and so on. So I feel like I've got this attachment to the whole game in England, which I love, and I see the real importance of it. I just had a meeting then around getting our players in series out into communities to make sure that they're being the role models that young people want to see. So yeah, I'm really connected to that. I'm really passionate about that, and I see the importance. I've worked in schools where I've tried to get young Asian girls playing cricket, and I see the importance. What Ebony's doing with the ACE program and things like that. Yeah, it's amazing, and I can see us really tapping into those areas, and I think they're going to, and Isha as well, what she's doing, take her lead. There's some really great things happening, and I certainly, my job is England coach, but I'm going to be working through the whole system because I see that part of my responsibility.
Because we are in a battle, aren't we? We're in a battle for eyeballs and in a battle for talent as well. And young female athletes. There's a whole suite of options now, and English cricket has to be mindful of that. Do you feel like the penny is dropping now?
Yeah, but how exciting for cricket now that we're probably one of the sports in England, female sports, that you could say you can have a proper career now.
Yeah,
I literally am so proud to say that, because when I grew up, I didn't even know that women's cricket existed. To think now you could go into a school and say you can earn brilliant money through playing cricket. You can go to the WPL, and 5 years ago, can you imagine saying that? It was so like, I think the sky's the limit really for where we can take the game, and I think but we've got to get eyeballs on the sport. We've got to get these types of ground feel now for internationals and 100 and domestic cricket. I think is an important vehicle for that as well.
Going back to the here and now, just briefly, Heather, one of the legends of the game. Do you think that it was inevitable that she would be removed from her post? And do you think, dare I ask, that it was the right decision on balance?
I think, firstly, she did a great job, and I think I'm probably the only person who knows.
Only you know her private pain.
Yeah, and what goes into that job, because it's not just being England captain; it's you're the face of the game as well. So it's a really, I really felt for her in Australia, because she
could see it, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could see it. You could see the pain she was going through and how tired she looked through probably the endless interviews trying to try and, I guess, help her team, etc. in tough times.
That game when it was raining, I think it was at Canberra, perhaps.
Yeah, and the frustration.
She was on her own. That vignette will stay with me, I think.
Yeah, and you
be an isolating
really,
business.
You really felt for her. I mean, I guess, look, I haven't, and I've said this publicly, I haven't read the review closely enough,
Okay.
but I think the ECB made their decision on a leadership reset, and I think that's something everyone's got to respect.
Have you spoken to her?
Yeah, I've had some good
conversation.
How's she doing? She's doing okay, and I think the most important thing is, I think she's excited about her batting now. We're going to get her bowling more, and
she's batting really well as well. Right?
She's batting
probably
so
as well as she's ever
well.
batted.
I sent her a message actually after the Ashes, because you could see how well she was playing. And you didn't want that to affect even a decision of potential retirement from the game, because, she's still young in those terms. And, I went up there the other week, she's still the fittest in the team. She's everything you want as one of your senior players, and certainly a role model for the young girls coming through. So, I know, she was obviously hurting from obviously being removed from the role, because, that's when it's been your life for 8.5 years, as I know. But yeah, she's in a good place. She's obviously playing for Somerset and
made runs
and took a wicket. And I really think that she can add so much value to this group over the next few years.
So Natalie, world-class player, delightful human being, externally quite a self-effacing kind of character. What kind of leadership qualities will she bring to the show?
I think she's going to lead from the front. There's absolutely no doubt about it. She's someone, I think, from a playing point of view, you want to follow. She's quiet. She goes about her business in a certain way, but she has the utmost respect of, I think, the playing group, and I think that's so important.
Obviously, you worked with her at Mumbai, and you'd have worked with her elsewhere as well. But do you know her well?
Yeah, and it's been really lovely actually, because she's probably a player I played with, and she's got to see me in a slightly different light in the last 3 years at Mumbai, and to win 2 WPL trophies with her and her be player of the tournament twice, you do go through a lot with a player, and I've just been really impressed by her leadership qualities. She was vice captain to Harmanpreet Kaur, the way she sort of brought that group together and was a sounding board for Harmanpreet, for me as well, because the messaging that has to go out there. So I've been nothing but been impressed. She will do it in a slightly different way, but that's okay. But she will lead by example, absolutely. And I just think she's in the form of her life.
And she wants it as well, doesn't she? And she's been
she
quite
absolutely
open about
wants it.
Yeah.
And I think that's half the battle, isn't it? And she'll no doubt do a fantastic job.
One of her jobs will be obviously bringing through the young kids, of which there are many interesting young cricketers kicking around. And of course, that'll be a key part of your job as well. A 21-year-old England female cricketer now, compared to a 21-year-old England female cricketer 20 years ago, is probably a slightly different animal, right? The scrutiny is different, the money is different, the opportunities are different, the professionalism, as you mentioned, is different. Is part of your job as a coach going to be managing people's expectations, but people's egos as well? And dare I say that the modern cricketer, because there is more on their plate, might be more tempted to be slightly more sort of selfish-minded, if you like, than when, say, you were growing up and the game was the thing rather than the individual. Are you going to be mindful of that as a coach?
Yeah, and again, it's probably one of my key principles is respect, and you've got to respect people's differences, and the game is different now to when I played it.
Yeah.
And I think that's again part of the role is not me living 20 years ago because things were slightly different. It's being up with how things are now, and there are a lot more opportunities. But it's about now managing. I think key part of being a coach is just managing people and getting the best out of people, but equally, I guess sticking to the values of the team, and making sure that everyone's aligned on that. So I'm fully aware of all the distractions now, because I've worked in WPL, I've worked in franchise cricket, but equally, I really hope that international cricket is the pinnacle still, because there's some great and wonderful things that lie ahead for us as a team and for those as individuals.
Do you see a landscape in the future where, as we're seeing in the men's game, international cricket isn't the number one?
I hope not, but yeah, I think the way the franchise kind of vehicles move in at pace, you can absolutely see that. But I think I really do hope that women's international cricket, men's international cricket is absolutely the pinnacle for most players.
Away from the nuts and bolts of this new role, Charlotte, your relationship with the game more generally. I've known you for years, and there are a few more passionate, committed devotees to cricket than you. My question is, has it ever wavered? Have you ever had your times when you thought, I'm running out of steam with this game, or I've had enough of it? Or has it always been there in your heart?
I just love the game, and
I don't think
it's ever. I think it's got stronger,
really?
Actually, since I've stopped playing. I think.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think you see the game differently as a non-player. I think you see what an impact cricket can have on people's lives, and certainly the impact it's had on my life. It's been incredible. So I'm extremely grateful for playing cricket, and I want to, I guess, share that passion with every single player that I come across, whether I coach them or meet them wherever. So
what makes it special then? This thing?
God, I think you just, I think the places it takes you, the people you meet, because I think for me, it's all about the people. Coaching's about people. The cricket is about the people I've met, the opportunities I've had, and the places I've been with the game. And that's someone that comes from a very small place called Pidley, and who would never have thought that I would have had the opportunities that I've had, to think, tonight I'm going to be going over to Lord's to see a portrait of myself at Lord's cricket ground. The last 3 weeks has been pretty overwhelming for me, but
Sure.
There's another significant moment where I'm going, Christ, girls from Pidley don't get to go up at Lord's. And I think hopefully what it says to any young person out there, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve if you've got desire, you've got ambition, and you've got a passion for what you do. And it is absolutely passion, because you've got to love what you do, because I've had some pretty dark days.
Sure.
But I've had so many great days, and it doesn't matter if I'm watching at Lord's or if I'm watching at a club ground. I get as much enjoyment out of watching small kids play than I do playing, being at England games. So that, I guess that's love, isn't it, for what you do?
You mentioned the portrait. I've seen it. I've been given a sneaky peek. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I absolutely love it. It was nearly 2 years ago that I sat on that balcony at Lord's. Probably the most impatient person you could ever have to do it, because I'm not. I hate photos.
How long did you sit for?
I did 3 or 4 sittings,
Right.
Probably for about 3 hours a time. So, and I had no idea what it entailed when I first signed up for it. And I was like, oh, by the 4th sitting, I was like, surely. And I didn't see it until about a month ago.
Did you not want to see it?
No, well, you can't. She doesn't want to show you it.
Oh, right.
So, she didn't show me the. She said, I'll show you when it's 90% ready, because I guess people will just go, I don't really like it. Well, it's done now. And I absolutely love it. It's basically, it's me. It's how I watch cricket.
So what I wanted to ask you, what does it capture about Charlotte Edwards?
Well, they asked me where I wanted it, and I wanted it on the Lord's balcony because it was so iconic. That's how when I think of Lord's, I think of the balcony at Lord's. I just think it shows me how, when I'm looking at the cricket, how much I'm invested in cricket when I watch. So it was, she got it perfect. And I'm really chuffed, and I can't wait for all my family. I haven't showed anyone. So
and this is happening tonight, right?
Yeah.
Well, best of luck with it. It's a genuinely beautiful portrait, it really is, and it does get you.
Yeah,
it grabs you, definitely. Good luck with it tonight. I hope it goes well, and thanks ever so much for joining us on the show. And best of luck with the next few months.
Thanks, Phil.
Cheers.
Right.
So how do we think the England side will line up in the T20s? We talked about the ODI side on last week's show, but this time there's not a World Cup round the corner. I think it's harder to work out. Where would you start with trying to attempt to guess what the team might look at?
I think we were all a bit kind of stumped by it, to be honest. You've obviously got the important that Sciver-Brunt can't bowl, so there's going to be a different lineup in that sense. But I was trying to work it out, and I was thinking, I don't know how much they'll actually change it from what's gone before, but equally they might go the other way and try and get more of the newer players they've picked in and try and do something really funky, because they haven't got that added pressure of the 50 over World Cup, like you said. So you can look at your bankers. The issue is as well, you've got the Sciver-Brunt, Knight, Jones kind of take up that middle order space where you might look to bring players in. You're going to be hard pushed to drop a Danny Whitehodge or a Beaumont. So maybe there's really only one space in that top 6 for someone to come in. I think the bowling attack is potentially more exciting. You've got Izzy Wong might get a game. You've got Emily Arlott, who might come back in as well. So it's tough to work out. And I think that throughout the series, there'll be a couple of different combinations that are tried, especially in the bowling attack with no Sophie Eccleston as well. So yeah, it is a tough one to work out. Where do you see it?
So Nat Sciver-Brunt's not bowling, which means you need to find another bowling option in the top 7. You could do that through Heather Knight and Alice Captie's off spin, but England normally play 3 frontline spinners and often just 1 specialist quick plus Sciver-Brunt. You probably can't do that now because that means you have 1 seam bowling option. So you could bring Emily Arlott into the equation batting at 7, which feels a spot high for an international cricket right now. But the other option would be to potentially drop one of the 3 spinners, Dean, Glenn or Smith. Or they could change, I don't know, there's that side of it. I'm also not sure on who the batters actually will be, because you think Danny White-Hodge will play. You think Dunkley will play in the top 3, given how well she went in the T20 leg of the Ashes, which, as you say, leaves minimal options for new players or newer players to come in lower down the order. It's not entirely clear how Alice Capsey actually gets into the team. Ditto Paige Schofield. Could they take away the gloves from Amy Jones and give them to Tammy Bowman? I think there's loads of things that are on the table here. So I think it's very hard to work out what the 11 will be. But I think you're right. They'll mix things up across the series. Ben, how do you see it?
I think, see it broadly similar. And I guess, as you've kind of hinted at, it's indicative of, where the 2 sides sort of are in their cycles, where it's obviously this odd situation where it's the start of a new era, and yet something that will go quite a long way to defining it is one of the first challenges they'll face in the ODI World Cup. So they want to experiment, but also be kind of knowing almost where they are and just fiddling around the edges to get to that final thing. With this, there is quite a lot of experimentation, and so perhaps they will actually just experiment through the series. So actually, kind of all the combinations we've discussed end up unfolding. I guess, because as you say, the squad is 6 specialist bowlers and then pretty much 8 batting options, and that's why it's a bit more confusing, because you almost think like, well, if they want 5 specialist bowlers, which with NSB injured they might do, then that basically means Arlott has to play. If they and then do they want to fudge it? They might think that, well, you might be able to fudge a 5th bowler between Capsey and Knight, but if you do that, have you learnt much about how you're actually going to balance the side against, say, an India, Australia, or South Africa? And then if you then think like, well, that balance of the side is fine, and then you get to that challenge and it's like, oh, actually, that's a real weak spot and they've targeted it and taken us down. I suppose you also have the point that at that point, Nat Sciver-Brunt will be back bowling. So you do just want to fudge it for this series and then give some of these players a go. But I feel like often though I say that like I can see them experimenting a lot and then they end up just picking an unchanged 11 for the But
it's a new era. So what they've done in the past is totally irrelevant to how they go about things. And I think one thing the new era was quite big on is what happens if Heather Knight's injured. Let's make sure that we have some prep in for if that happens. Well, actually, from a playing point of view and a team composition point of view, it has always been a far bigger deal if Nat Sciver-Brunt can't play, because she balances the side. And she's playing now, but as a specialist batter. So how they balance a side without her bowling, I think, will be really, really interesting. And I think you'll see how much they value the bowling of batting all-rounders and the batting of bowling all-rounders and how they go about picking a side for this series. Katya, what should we expect from the West Indies? T20 World Cup semi-finalists in the autumn, but didn't qualify for the 50-over World Cup a few weeks ago in the qualifier. What should we expect from them?
Yeah, I was trying to think about what it actually means for the West Indies in terms of that qualifier. So beyond the obvious that they won't be at the 50-over World Cup in a couple of months' time. And I was actually thinking, we've just spoken about how we kind of know how the England side's going to line up for the ODIs, or roughly give or take a few places. This might be an opportunity for the West Indies to be a bit more creative with their ODI lineup, having got that freedom of not having to prepare for a major tournament in a few months' time. They're without Deandra Dottin and they're without Chanel Henry, who are 2 massive losses for them. They were the 2 of their, obviously, Deandra Dottin needs no kind of history behind her. We've had Chanel Henry on this podcast a few months ago, and her journey over the last few months, 6 months now, has been well documented. So those are going to be 2 heavy losses, and that increases the always question of how much they rely on Hayley Matthews, which we saw in that World Cup qualifier as well. But it is potentially a bit of an opportunity for them to look beyond those two players who are bankers in pretty much every side the West Indies play at the minute, and go through other options and really kind of get West Indies cricket back in a better place over the next cycle before the next T20 World Cup, and going into the future ODI World Cup, without that hanging over them in a few months' time. So I guess it's a bit of an unknown, really. We know what to expect from the West Indies bankers, so your Hayley Matthews and your Campbells and your Ashley Fletchers and all that lot, your Zayda Jameses, but there are a couple of lesser known faces in their squad, so it'll be interesting to see how they go. So I guess that's what to look out for. I thinking back to last summer when we had New Zealand and Pakistan over here, and to be honest, the standard of cricket wasn't great. I'm actually more hopeful this time that West Indies will pose a bit more of a challenge to England. I think just having that kind of those newer players mixed in with that kind of star quality, plus being freed up a little bit from the pressure and expectation of that World Cup qualifier, will hopefully do them a world of good. That's maybe an optimistic take to put on it, but I'm feeling optimistic.
Ben, do you share Katya's optimism?
I think, it's just such an obvious thing to say, but they depend so much on Hayley Matthews that it makes it in some ways quite a hard series or to predict. Like, you look at how England went last summer, you look at West Indies not making that World Cup, and you think that anything less than 6-0 really across the two tours, across the two series, should really be a bit of a disappointment to England. And you have a cricketer in the opposition who can win any game by herself against any opposition on her day. So, that does make it quite a hard thing to sort of say, what should England be expecting? What could West Indies do? Because she is, one of the best cricketers in the world and is in exceptional form and will have a point to prove with how that qualifier ended in such heartbreaking fashion. Having said that, obviously Katya mentioned it, but if you're West Indies and you're already a side who are so dependent on your best players, basically, if you're then almost missing two of your three best players, at least you're not missing your very best player, you're missing two of your three best players
in the T20 setup in particular.
That is a really hard thing to overcome. But look, we would have also said that England should have been big favourites going into that last group stage game against West Indies at that World Cup. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yet that ended up almost their favourite status ended up weighing heavy on them, and West Indies had a point to prove and a semi-final spot to win, and they did it, and they've got a point to prove here again. So I don't quite share Katya's optimism, I would say, but I still think it will be interesting nonetheless.
Next up, Lauren Winfield-Hill on the West Indies series and the latest domestic action. The international summer is about to get underway. Lauren, how do you think England will be using these T20s? Without Nat Sciver-Brunt bowling, it's harder to work out exactly how they're going to balance the side, because they've always normally had a seam bowling option in the top 7. They often field sides that in the tail end from 8 to 11, they only have one seamer. They can't do that this time round. So how do you think they're going to go about balancing the side without Sciver-Brunt's bowling?
I think they'll just back there. Like, you look at somebody like a Charlie Dean, she's more than capable with the bat as well. So I feel like they'll probably have to almost go, your top 6 are your batters, and then 7 to 11 are your bowlers that can offer with the bat. I think, because like you say, you forget the luxury of having that Sciver-Brunt bowl and the balance that gives to your side, or whether you play somebody like Alice Capsey as that all-rounder. It probably makes it harder for somebody like Paige Schofield to get in without bowling. Whether Heather Knight will play every T20, that might be a way of looking at, your Capseys, your Schofields, those kind of players. But yeah, I think like the way they'll view it is they'll want to win. Like, I think especially get ahead in the series before you start experimenting, because I think there's quite a lot of pressure on this England team at the minute in this whole, like, whatever you want to call it, reset or new era or whatever gets sort of thrown around. But it's been, we've well documented, it's been a poor winter gone, and it's there's plenty of excitement, no doubt, but we hope we get that excitement match, don't we?
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's been talked about a little bit so far this summer is that it looks like Heather Knight's going to do a bit more bowling. She certainly has done for Somerset, and ditto Alice Capsey at times for Surrey as well. It looks like we'll have a look at the other all-round options as you say, that in the past it's been overly reliant perhaps on Sciver-Brunt to offer overs in the top 6, but actually we might get a proper look at Knight and maybe Capsey with the ball as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you look at, like, again, I feel like I bang on about the Aussies, but you look at their T20, their T20 side especially. I mean, historically they've had bowlers in that team sort of down at 8, 9, 10, 11 that can genuinely bat. You have your Sophie Molyneux's, your, in the past, Jess Jonason's, that can offer handy runs with the bat, and that's where I see like a Charlie Dean. She's more than capable of scoring some handy runs down the bottom order. I think that's the way they've got to go. Is they're going to is to have that sort of probably bowling all rounder, or that all rounder at 7, rather than at times we've played an out and out batter. And I think when Nat's not bowling, you can't do that. It just throws the balance of the side out.
We got a very long email from one of our listeners, John, who said, following our recent discussion about Sophia Dunkley and her recall in the ODI setup, despite not having great ODI numbers recently, John says there's another way of looking at Sophia Dunkley's ODI numbers. When Lisa Keightley was head coach, she averaged 32, struck at 84, had 104 50s in there as well. When John Lewis was head coach, she averaged 13, struck at 70 with just 150. And John says Dunkley was among a number of players who appeared to lose their way during Lewis's tenure. She never played more than 3 ODI innings in a row at the same position under Lewis, who didn't seem to have a clear idea of where best to use her, and she often came into the side for one game here or there to fill varied roles of injured or rested players. When given a clear and consistent role in the past, she's been able to succeed. Her 291 runs at the 22 World Cup were the most ever scored from number 6 or lower at any edition of the Women's World Cup. As well as a strong start to the season, Dunkley also has an outstanding record in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy and Metro Bank One Day Cup combined. In her 18 matches across the 2 competitions, she has 1,013 runs at 77 and a strike rate of 88, reaching 50 every other innings, 400s, 550s. Despite fairly limited opportunities to play over the years, Dunkley's 4 centuries are the second most scored in the competitions combined since 2020. Only Eve Jones has more. She has 5 from 54 innings compared to Dunkley's 4 from 18. Very stats heavy, very informative from John. But there's a story in that, right? It's really hard for players to nail a role when they're not given a clear role.
Yeah, shout out John. He needs to get on the podcast. He makes our job a lot easier, doesn't he? But I think he's got a really good point. I think it's not surprising. Like, you look at anybody who gets a consistent role, they generally, if they're a good enough player, they'll produce good numbers from that. I think it can often be quite cyclical with players as well, in terms of, I think everybody, like, apart from probably senior players or some of the best players in the world, like, you often find certain people play well under certain coaches, and then there's a change, and then they may not play so well. And because every coach sets up with a different vision and philosophy, and the way in which they're trying to play, and the language that they use, and how that's perceived for players, whether that adds pressure or takes pressure away. And I actually think with someone like Sophia Dunkley, like, the whole brand and entertaining and aggression and all that, I actually think adds a level of pressure, because you're in ODI cricket, you're then trying to put your foot on the gas quite early. And I think with that is you lose consistency. So I think it's not surprising. I think with the consistent role, and probably messaging of, or no messaging, just play. Like, we're picking you to do the role that you do in this team and do it your way. Like, it doesn't need to be a brand. It doesn't need to be entertaining. It's just, you just bring your best. And that's why we're picking you. And I think there was probably like this evolution of, she then got put up the order in T20 and was like this whacker that just went to win the power play. And she's a better player than that. And then it probably takes a little bit of time to come out the other side and find your tempo again. So, yeah, I mean, it's not hugely surprising. Like, I know that the last few tours that I was on, even that summer when we had the test match against India, like I'd say that was the best summer that she's played for England. And that was obviously the back end of sort of Lisa Kitely's reign. But yeah, like, it's one of those things, and good players come out the other side as well, and keep putting their name forward, like an Emma Lamb has done, like a Sophia Dunkley. But yeah, it's not, I think certain coaches sit well with players, or and I'm not saying that she didn't have that from John Lewis, but I do think there was probably this pressure of being a get on with it batter, a power play, high strike rate, go and change the game. And actually, the way in which she's played 50 over cricket, it's not that tempo at all. It's very much play the situation, build yourself into an innings, and look to sort of explode at the back end. And you play that way with that template, you're going to be more consistent because you're not trying to get 50 off 30 every time.
No, absolutely. Onto your own game at the moment. Yorkshire beat Essex, so your current club and the club you're about to go out on loan to in the one day in the T20 Cup. Really big result, right, for Yorkshire, Tier 2 team doing over a Tier 1 team.
Yeah, it was a good game of cricket actually. The pitch was awesome, obviously high scoring. It probably got a little bit closer than we'd have maybe liked. But I think that's the nature of when you're tracing a decent score, like somebody's going to try and put their foot down. I think for the back sort of 7 or 8 overs, they needed 15s, and they got pretty close in the end, but it's a long time to maintain that sort of tempo. But yeah, it's a good, like I said to you, it's a weird one, because it's like we have that expectation of ourselves based on how we train, the infrastructure that we've got in place, like the professionalism, obviously, at Yorkshire, compared to some other Tier 2 teams. But it's always nice to affirm that actually we're travelling all right. And you think, if you add in potentially a couple of recruitments or an overseas or something like that for next year, like we're going all right. We're trending in the right direction. And I think that was just like there was a lot sort of said about it, wasn't it, about the chance to play a Tier 1 team. And we actually sort of like debunked a bit of that in the week, was like, actually, like, we've got nothing to prove, like, and we know that we operate like a Tier 1 team, and actually the fact that we're in Tier 2 is no reflection of how good a cricketers we are. It's almost like not playing above what it is, it's just another game. But yeah, I thought we played, the way Stair Callis played was unbelievable. And actually, like, I think we're really pulling together as a good team now. We look a good unit, and like losing Maddie Ward after the first over when she split her webbing, just everyone sort of pulled in. Like, we had no spare bowlers we had to use all of our bowlers to their full allocation. But everybody just pulled in really nicely and did their role, which was great.
Do you know who you're playing in the quarters?
Yeah, I think we've got Warwickshire at home on Saturday. I'm pretty sure it's Warwickshire. So yeah, another good side, which will be, like I say, I think this cup's been awesome for us this year. Like, I know there's some teams are playing nearly that Essex side was, minus injuries, was their full strength side. I know that like Somerset played a full strength side, and some teams are sort of, resting players, and, it's a bit invariable in terms of what people are putting out. But I think, like, for us, having been in Tier 2, for the most of the season, it's quite a nice little cup just to see where you're at, really.
And Kent are the other Tier 2 side that are going to be in the quarterfinals. They're playing the Blaze, all 4 quarterfinals rather, taking place on Saturday afternoon. Just finally, I just wanted to leave with a tweet from Hypocourse on Twitter, who was commenting on the number of views that the live streams are getting at the moment. He said over 350,000 live stream views for yesterday's Metrobank Women's One Day Cup fixtures. After 31 games, the total of 2.5 million for the season has already surpassed last season's Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy that had 2.2 million from 58 matches, so far averaging over double the views per match compared with last year. And actually, there are times when you have women's one-day cup matches happening at the same time as men's county championship games. And more often than not, the women's comps have more views on it. So it's an amazing start to, I suppose, the engagement of the new structure. And it sort of shows that digitally, loads of people are watching it at the moment. Crowds not necessarily following suit yet, but it sort of shows the potential of what crowds could be in the women's domestic game when the infrastructure is right.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you also get the fixtures, I think actually we found with Tier 2, we've almost played on better days. Like we've played a lot of Saturdays, and I know a lot of obviously the one-day cup is quite often midweek. So, you're saying the streaming numbers are high, which is fantastic. I think realistically, you're not going to get huge crowds on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or whatever. But it certainly just highlights the appetite for it, doesn't it? That if people aren't there in the crowd, they're certainly, dialing in and watching, which is awesome. And like, you just want that to keep growing, don't you? I think it's, I think having the England players play, like we've spoke about that a lot, is making it a better brand. I think the wickets are like the M1 at the minute, which helps because it's mad high scoring. Because the pitches in the outfields are just rock hard and lightning fast. So it's a good start. I mean, it always helps, isn't it? The sun's been shining. It's been a great start to the summer. And long may that continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the next time that I'm on the motorway and it's really smooth, I'm just going to say it's just like Beckenham.
It's just like Beckenham. Where are you? I'm just driving along Beckenham.
Anyway, exciting times. Start the international summer in 24 hours or so. Lauren, catch you next week.
Thanks, Yas.
And finally, India have named some squads for the upcoming tour of England. Katya, what are the headlines?
I guess the two key headlines from the squad are about injuries and players who have been reselected after periods out of the side. So Renuka Singh Thakur and Pooja Vastreka are both injured out of the series. That could be actually really, really important. Vastreka and Renuka are by far India's best seamers in the ODI setup, at least. I think since the beginning of 2023, they've taken in the T20 format, they've taken like 67 T20 wickets between them, and the rest of India's bowlers have basically taken half. Seam bowlers have taken half of that. So, and it's a similar kind of story with particularly Thakur in the ODIs. So they are two really, really crucial injuries, and they've called up a couple of quite inexperienced seamers. So that could be a potential talking point throughout the series. They don't have those two quality seamers that they've had over the past few years. The other two were Shafali Verma being back in the T20s and Sneha Rana coming back in both formats. Sneha Rana actually hasn't played a T20 for India since 2023. But she did really, really well in that ODI tri-series that finished a week ago now. And she was called up as an injury replacement in the WPL and did fairly decently for RCB. So you can kind of see the thought process behind that. Verma is back in the T20s, but she's not back in the ODI squad. So Verma was dropped from India's T20 setup and ODI setup last year in kind of like the middle end of last year. So she wasn't in either series against the West Indies at home, that series that Chanel Henry did really, really well in. And she was dropped for the ODI series against Australia before that. So she hasn't played for India since October last year, and she wasn't involved in that tri-series. And that was a little bit confusing because I think a couple of weeks before that squad for that tri-series was announced, she was included on India's central contract list. So while that suggested that the dropping was kind of temporary, she then wasn't selected for the tri-series. And there have been reports around that her fielding is potentially a contributor to that, but she has done so well domestically over the last year, which I'll get onto in a second, that kind of compounded the questions over why she wasn't in that squad. But just before getting into that, it's worth just a brief summary of her career so far. She was selected, just a lot of people will know this, but just to kind of get us up to date, she was obviously selected for international debut aged 15 in 2019, became the youngest player ever to represent India in a T20 international, had a lot of initial success, was named player of the series in a series later that year against the West Indies, was given a central contract as a teenager for the first time in 2020, very quickly rose to the top of the ICC T20 rankings, and then she made her ODI debut in 2021, and that's the format she's kind of struggled in a little bit. She averages 23 after 29 innings with 4 half centuries, and the runs were starting to dry up before she was dropped last year. But since then, she's had an absolutely ridiculous run in domestic cricket.
It is mad.
Yeah, domestic 50-over cricket specifically. So in India, she's basically been the best batter in the country across multiple competitions. She scored almost 1,000 runs across 12 50-over matches. In the Indian domestic season. She also took a hat-trick in an under-23 match, which is kind of fun as well.
She shouldn't be playing under 23 cricket. That's ridiculous.
But it's the under-19 World Cup as well that she had like 50 caps to her name. And she also finished as the joint 4th highest run scorer in the WPL this year. So she's basically done everything a player can do when they're dropped.
Quite a big deal that she's not on the 50-over side then.
Yeah, it is quite a big deal. And where it's important is with the 50-over World Cup coming up, which is actually really quite soon now, there are questions over particularly the pace of India's top order in ODIs, or the pace at which they bat, which obviously is something that Verma is very well known for as being a naturally aggressive style of player, and something that has been seen not necessarily in ODI cricket at the minute, but particularly in the domestic run she scored over the last few months. So while India have got that fairly settled middle order in Harmanpreet Kaur, Jamima Rodriguez, Richa Ghosh, Dipti Sharma, and they've got Mandana at the top, they've got Pratika Rawal, who did amazingly in the series against Ireland before the Tri-Series and did really well in the Tri-Series as the kind of current opening partner. There's been like a cycle of opening partners alongside Mandana. And they've also got Harley and Diol at number 3. When Rawal and Diol bat together, they score at 4.6 runs and over, which is not, I think it's one of the slowest kind of recorded partnerships for India women over the last 10 years or something in ODI cricket. And that's kind of the area where India really need to improve. They're not a side that typically, I mean, they obviously are examples of it, but consistently putting on those huge totals that are needed, that's kind of the area of improvement. And that's where Verma's ODI selection is slightly controversial, in that she is a player who would do that, or who has the potential to do that for them. And she's not in it at the minute, so that could be an option they look going forward. It's also worth saying Diol and Pratika Rawal have scored a lot of runs, so it's not that they're not scoring runs, it's the pace at which they're scoring them that's made their kind of selection over Verma slightly more controversial.
And given, as you say, with the World Cup just around the corner, not being in the squad now is quite a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's a massive deal, because I mean, you know, there's no doubt, I think, that this is a temporary blip in what looks set to be one of the great careers, and that she looks set to be actually kind of one of the defining cricketers or figures in world cricket over the next decade, basically, given, you know, her talent, the start that she's had. And yet there's going to be a home World Cup in the main, you know, format in women's cricket, and she at this point is not going to be involved. And I think, you know, it's one of the things you'll look back in 10 years time and be like, hang on, why wasn't she in that kind of thing? And yet that is very much the way it's heading. And yeah, Kat's absolutely right. I think it could actually, like as well as Pratika Rawal has done, like Verma is a difference maker, and she's the kind of player that you think you drop her to teach her a lesson, fine, and say, you know, you've got to go back, these things aren't handed to you, you've got to go back, make some runs. But then when she's done that, okay, it's tricky when someone is coming in and having a record breaking start, but it's not just the run she's scoring in domestic cricket, she is striking at about 150 across in domestic competitions. Like, she is doing things at a rate and at a speed that no one else can match. And yeah, at the moment looks like she won't be at that World Cup.
Well, a very interesting storyline to watch ahead of that England-India series. And yeah, all eyes on how the other Indian players in the top order, Mandana aside, get on. That is everything for today's show. Cheers for listening. We'll be back on the Patreon after the first England-West Indies T20I at Canterbury.